If you want to go around and start with introductions, that would be great. Um, I am Dr. Smith. I recently just finished my PhD in June. And yeah, pretty exciting. And I'm currently working at Novartis as a computational biologist in cancer genomics. And so this is like getting a point of view from an early career scientist, and then we'll get experience from someone else. And so, Courtney, if you want to go next.
Hello, everyone. I'm Courtney Grace. I'm an undergrad student at Tech Community College, and I'm interested in going into computer science, but eventually focusing on computational biology. So Dr. Smith is kind of like my fairy, just like following in her footsteps. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Hi, my name is Enyce Fairbanks. I'm an undergrad at Arizona State University. I'm interested in one day studying experimental pathology and hopefully getting my PhD in it.
I'm Lesley Weaver. I am an assistant professor at Indiana University in the biology department, and I study how organs talk to each other using the Drosophila or fruit fly ovary as a model.
Dr. Weaver and Dr. Smith, please tell us where you're from.
I can start. I'm from a small town in Indiana called Marion, Indiana. So if Indiana was a person, it'd be where the heart is. And my family's been there since the mid 1800s. We have actually a small settlement called Weaver, Indiana, that's 5 minutes outside of Marion. So yeah, I came back to IU. I had the opportunity to come back and be closer to family for my professor position.
Wow, that's really cool. So you can trace your lineage back pretty far, I'm sure.
Just on my mom's side, yeah.
No, that's cool. So I'm originally from Wilmington, Delaware. I grew up there all my life. I went to University of Delaware, go Blue Hens, and then I did a post-bac at Baylor College of Medicine. So I spent some time in Houston, and then I've spent the last 4 years at UNC Chapel Hill in North Carolina, and I'm moving to Boston next week. So kind of all over the place.
Congratulations. Could you both please tell us where you attended school, undergrad and grad school, please?
Yeah, so I actually started where at Arizona State University. So go Sun Devils for my freshman year. And then I moved back to Indiana to IU Bloomington, where I'm at now, where I finished my bachelor's of science. And then I stayed here for my PhD. And we can go into all the reasonings why I made those decisions if you're interested. And then I did my postdoctoral fellowship at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Indiana. And then I had the opportunity to come back closer to home for family and health reasons. And so now I'm back at IU Bloomington.
So how would you say IU compares to when you were at Hopkins? Because I know now you're like an assistant professor. So how was your experiences different there, you would say?
Yeah, so at Hopkins, I was on the East Baltimore or Med campus, which didn't have the undergrad. So they have two campuses. One is the Homewood campus, which you would think of as a normal college campus. And then there is the East Baltimore campus that had the hospital and it was more downtown. So for me, being on a med campus, it was a big shock after coming from two big undergraduate universities from Arizona State to IU. And at times I did miss that hustle and bustle of like undergrads. Like I feel like each school year you get this rejuvenation of people excited for classes, and it was just kind of the status quo every day. But I think being on a med campus made me personally realize that I didn't want to be in that setting for my career. I wanted to be on an undergrad campus, and so that was another big factor in how I chose where I'd like to be.
You make a good point because I went to UNC And so my program is through the School of Medicine. So we are on the med school campus, but because the med school campus is so close to the undergraduates, it wasn't like a big a difference as like yours has separate campuses. Like the campuses
Yeah.
are separate, but like you just walk down the street and they're still there. So I think it's definitely a different experience. Like I like universities where you can interact more with the undergrads, and like we were able to interact with the med students, the dental students, so a lot of other professional students that I felt like rounded out our experience more, especially working more with like the Black professionals, and we had more access to them. So that was nice.
Yeah, it's all very important. What are both of your current job titles?
So mine's is like complicated for no reason, but I'm a senior expert 2 in data science for oncology, which basically just means I'm a computational biologist.
And I'm an assistant professor of biology, so I am I'm at the start of my career. So you go from assistant to associate when you become tenured, and then you can be promoted to full professor. So I'm at the very beginning stages.
Very nice. How would you guys describe what a geneticist is and the branch that you're working in currently, and how it
Okay,
kind of correlates?
you want to start? That's like a hard question.
It is a hard question. So I feel like I'm an imposter in the big group because I view myself as a cell biologist because that's how I was classically trained. I say I'm a cell biologist who uses genetics, but I would say that, you know, when I think of a geneticist as someone who's thinking about you know, how different alleles of a gene. So if you have one copy that's mutant or a copy that's in a copy that's wild type, a geneticist is thinking, well, you know, how is this mutated allele acting in the context of the organism? You know, sometimes you could have one mutant allele and the organism is fine, and it's only when you have two that there are problems. So I think a geneticist is someone who is thinking of the organism as a whole instead of the intricate pieces and parts. And so if anyone has time, there's a cute story called the demise of Bill. And I heard about it when I first started grad school, and it's talking about the differences between a geneticist and a biochemist. And there are these two friends, Bill and Doug. One is a biochemist and one is a geneticist, and they're looking at this car factory to see like how a car is made. So the geneticist like says, I'm going to take away the steering wheel and see what happens to the car when you take away the steering wheel. Whereas the biochemist wants to put each individual part together to see how it's functioning. So I think of genetics as like, I'm interested in like this one aspect or maybe multiple aspects. I'm going to take it away and see how it affects the organism.
Yeah, I think she sums it up pretty well. And that story's interesting. I'm gonna have to look it up. I would say similarly, because I'm more in the cancer genomics than genetics aspect, I feel like with multi-omics, there's so many different things that you can look at now that we're getting a better picture of human health. And so I look at it from the human health aspect and like more clinical genetics and genomics. So yeah, I think exactly what she said was perfect. That's how I would describe myself, just like covering a bunch of different assays and experimental tools.
Thank you.
So now I want to ask you some questions about how you guys got to where you are. What prompted you to become a biologist?
I can start. It's kind of a windy path, like I think you'll hear a lot of scientists say. The catalyst was that I grew up as a caregiver, but I actually wanted to be an astronomer growing up. I lived in the cornfields of Indiana, and so I spent a lot of summer nights looking up at the stars, and I just thought it was very cool how we're on this globe that's rotating around the sun in the middle of nowhere. But my great grandmother had dementia. And so my mother and I moved in with my grandmother to take care of my great grandmother when I was 8. And we took care of her in our home until she passed away when I was 20. So that was my whole childhood of being a caregiver to her, as well as my grandmother's 3 brothers who all died from cancer. So I spent a lot of my teenage years taking them to their health appointments. And so when my great grandmother got sick during my freshman year at Arizona State, I realized I was more interested in how our bodies function and when things go incorrectly. And so that's kind of when I decided that I was going to switch my major to biology, and just became curious of how our bodies are supposed to function normally. So I guess maybe since I was a caregiver, I've never wanted to look at a clinical aspect of biology. I just kind of want to understand when things are supposed to, how they're normally supposed to happen, and what the biological mechanisms of that are.
I would say mine is very similar. I started out as a biochemist, and so that's why I really like the analogy. I started out as a biochemist, and I actually went to a technical school, so I went to a trade school. And in high school, I was in chemistry laboratory, and so I really got interested in like protein modeling and like figuring out at the protein level. And then I got really interested in undergrad in biomedical engineering. And I was like, I like this, but it's not like clinical enough. It's not patient population enough for me. And so I eventually moved into the realm where I get to work more directly on patient samples or patient data and etc. And then I landed here.
Yeah, that all sounds really interesting. Do you guys have any role models or people who were particularly impactful during your training?
Yeah, I guess because I went to a non-traditional high school, I guess my shop teacher, she was our chemistry laboratory teacher, and she was very impactful because she was the reason I got my first research internship in high school. And that kind of catapulted me into research. So yeah, I'm still friends with her on Facebook. So and then I had a lot of other clinical mentors along the way. So like I stay in touch with them all now. And I really believe in like having a mentoring network. And so along the way, they've been all vital in different aspects and like different ways. And they kind of have helped me in different ways.
Yeah, I'd say as far as my career, my undergrad slash grad graduate advisor was most impactful. So she is very tough. It wasn't an easy PhD experience, but I felt as though I learned a lot about how to do science, how to kind of have this grit that is needed to persevere. And she's actually like helped me like get into the network of like funding and how to like always kind of hustle to get funding for your research. And that's something that I've always been appreciative of. And also like as far as being a mentor, it didn't end when I graduated from my PhD. So she's been a mentor like since I was an undergrad through now. Like I literally just sent her something for this grant that I'm writing and she edited it, no problem. I'd say like another role model that I have is Cassandra Ectovor, who is a professor at Harvard. So she was the first Black PI woman that I met. And I met her, I think my second year in grad school. She came to give a memorial lecture, and it was just like amazing. And I kind of have been a fan of her ever since. And she's actually who I call a sponsor. So she will send opportunities to me and say, hey, you should apply for this. So it's not necessarily direct mentoring, but it's someone who's saying like, hey, I want to see more of us in this community. So I'm going to send you these opportunities. You should apply for it regardless. So
Yeah, that sounds really good. I know it's very impactful to hear people you would look at as role models also having their own role models and still needing that mentorship. Um, what are some of the greatest obstacles you faced during your career?
Considering I just finished my PhD, I think that was like the greatest obstacle. Um, that it was really difficult. And I hit a lot of obstacles in the terms that like I finished in 4 years, and originally like I had other plans to go to med school afterwards. That went out the window, and then like it was a lot of like figuring out what I really want to do in life and like coming to terms with or like grieving this is the life that I wanted and realizing that it's okay that you no longer want that life and figuring out what is really something that I want to do rather than like holding on to like a childhood dream.
I'd say my biggest obstacle so far is starting my assistant professor position in July 2020. So right at the start of the pandemic that we are still in. We are still in a pandemic, like multiple actually. And so I think that was really hard. And I had just been given like a very significant health diagnosis like 2 months before that. So I think that's been a big obstacle that I'm still going through, but I think there's light at the end of the tunnel. So the best advice that I think anyone has given me was my postdoc advisor, where she was like, I'm just going to keep doing this job until someone tells me no. And so it's like, I'm just going to keep going. Like I have this position, going to try and do my best. And I have to, like, as long as I know that I did my best, if I don't get tenure, then life will go on. So, you know, we have our PhD, it's a critical thinking degree, can get a job anywhere doing anything.
I think that's a very important point because people think that like I had a friend who was so focused on like, well, I have my PhD in this, and it's like that doesn't matter. The skills that you gain, it doesn't, you don't have to stay in that specific field in order to move on, like, or to transition or pivot into another field. All the skills that you gain, critical thinking, like you can easily apply them to other fields, to other jobs. Like we have a degree that like spans across, and I like that.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice of like life goes on and keeps going because that is my biggest anxiety of like I freak out and I'm like, nope, there's it still keeps going.
Yeah, I mean, the world is going to keep spinning, and if it stops, it doesn't matter because we're all messed up anyways.
Yeah,
You know, it's going to be okay.
literally.
What is your current position the one you envisioned for yourself when you were an undergrad? And then did it change? Like, did you envision it also when you were a graduate student?
Yeah, I just kind of spoke to that. It changed a lot for me. And I think that like one of my mentors, she always tells me like she like runs the public health at like Medical College of Wisconsin. And she's always like, yeah, I still don't know what I want to do with my life. And so that's how I feel. And I think that you're constantly like, is this really what I want to do? Or like, not that you're not fulfilled in life, but you're always envisioning and like growing and learning. And then you figure out that, oh, maybe I want to add this to my life, or like I want to add this skill. So I feel like nothing is how I envisioned it.
Yeah, I had no intentions of becoming a professor. I say that kind of true. So I did want to be an educator. My grandmother is a retired sixth grade teacher, so that
Oh,
has always been a part of my life. But I always thought once I decided to go down the biology and biochem route that I would work at a pharmaceutical company. So Eli Lilly is a big company here in Indiana, and I was like, yep, I'm going to get my degree, go work in pharmaceutical. And it was really when I started as a lab assistant during my undergrad years that is like, oh, people do research on university campuses, and this is actually a career. And then the grad students were like, well, you should go to grad school. And I was like, okay, I guess, it's like, I'll do that. And, I had been again, my undergrad, who also was my grad mentor, we had this NIH initiative for maximizing student diversity program. And so that was a program I was in my last 2 years of undergrad, which she helped funnel me into that. So I feel as though I hadn't planned on this, but I feel like I've been trained to be in this position. And it's kind of like taking my postdoc advisor's philosophy is like, just keep going until someone tells you no. And then, even then, if you're told no, there are other things that you can do with your life.
I completely agree.
No, I really like that. Keep going until someone says no. I think I'm going to live by that as of right now. So are you guys working on any current projects in your positions as an assistant professor and as a data science worker?
Yeah, so I have a lot of projects going on in my lab. I have a research associate and one graduate student who have their own projects, and then I'm kind of tinkering away on my own projects / trying to help them get papers published, because that's the big thing for tenure, is that you need to have a certain amount of papers in your portfolio, as well as grant funding and some other things to get promoted. So it's kind of like, yeah, we have lots of projects going on.
So yeah, so I'm working the clinical space, not so much in the preclinical space. And at the moment I'm working on maybe 3 different therapeutic drugs. And so essentially what I do, because I see the next question is like, what do you do on a day-to-day? Typically what I do is work on like a big clinical trial. And so like I'll work with a statistician, I'll work with the clinicians, and then they like have a clinical trial lead and etc. And all the data that they have associated with that specific clinical trial, I work on it and I basically give them results. So like when you see the like the American Cancer Society or the big oncology conferences, a lot of the times it's analysts who give the doctors the data and they tell them like, these are my findings. And then the doctors are like, okay, is this meaningful? And we kind of work together to figure out how we can either move the drug forward, or if it's time to move the drug forward, or if it's not worth it. And so I'm working on also a project dedicated towards trying to develop proteomics. So we want a proteomics assay, and like everyone's moving into that space right now. And I feel like it's like single cell announced proteomics. So we're gonna see.
I know you already touched base, Dr. Smith, on your typical day, but what would you both say it's like? Is it very flexible? Is it rigid, considering, especially Dr. Smith coming from grad school and going into the workforce now, and then Dr. Weaver as an assistant professor?
It's very flexible for me. I think the way people kind of say is that with this flexibility, it's like you could be working at any time. So I can choose not to work on a day or choose to go to work. There was one time I went up to my hometown on a weekday to see my grandma, and she's like, did you have to tell anyone that you were leaving? I was like, no, like no one touches base with me. Like I don't clock in, clock out, that sort of thing. But there's the responsibility that I have to get papers and my grant funding. So right now, I think the biggest difference for me coming off of being a trainee, so grad student or postdoc, is that there are so many other things that are taking time away from my schedule. So as a faculty member, you're put on committees, like you're expected to do some service in the department. Right now, I haven't been at the bench for like a month because I'm writing 2 grants. And so that's just been sucking up my time. I have personnel that I have to like manage and help them with their projects. So it's really, they're the ones who are my hands. And so then also I'm at an undergraduate institution. So I have teaching responsibilities. I've done a way where I've clustered all of my teaching for the spring semester so that my fall can be dedicated to research. And so there is time in the fall that I will start prepping for my classes next semester. So it's kind of a very flexible schedule, meaning that I could take a Monday off if I want to, but then I can also work on Saturdays. So it's like I choose when I'm going to work to get things done.
Mine's is actually not that different from undergrad because I was already dry lab. So I'm still dry lab. The only difference really is that I think the team that I work on now is very interactive. They like talking a lot. So I think that's the biggest difference is like I had a lot of meetings in my PhD because I worked like with the Cancer Genome Atlas, ClinGen, things like that. So my PIs and I was co-mentored, so that also added another layer. But I was always in a bunch of meetings, and like now I have less meetings. So I was like, this is actually great. So yeah, my schedule really hasn't changed. I get up unless I have like an early meeting, I get up when I typically get up. But I have less meetings now, so I'm happier.
What do you both like most about what you're doing as a teacher and as someone who's transitioning from grad school into the work industry? How do you both like it?
I like the flexibility. I think I'm still trying to get used to my position. Like, I think whenever you start something new, and I've been told to stop downplaying the fact that I started this position during the pandemic or, in this really crazy time. But I do enjoy the flexibility. I enjoy training people, even though like sometimes it can be where you forget that you were a trainee at one point in time and it's like, oh, like I forgot that I have to tell you to wash this solution out. Like I wouldn't have thought of that, but that's what makes it fun. And seeing that you're actually helping someone develop into a scientist is interesting and fun.
I agree with that. I think that I like most is that I still am maintaining the same amount of flexibility, and I get to see the clinical application more. Like a lot of the work I did before was like preclinical, or I did work as a clinical trial analyst before, but it wasn't as close knit with the physicians and like working directly on the team. It was more like a working group. So this is a lot more hands-on, and I get to lead it myself and like get to ask the questions I want to ask. Like obviously like there's a theme that they're concerned with, but it's not like, oh, you just lose like the academic mindset. It's very very similar to my PhD where we're constantly thinking about different solutions or different plans and like how we can look at the data. So I enjoy that. I'm basically just doing the same thing with more money.
What is something you've both accomplished throughout your careers that you're proud of?
Yeah, that's hard. I think that for me, I'm just happy to have finished my PhD. The pandemic was really difficult, not even because I'm an introvert, so it wasn't difficult like as an extrovert. It was just difficult with like we had already had a lot of meetings pre-pandemic, and then they like tripled in the pandemic. And I was like, I know we were using Zoom a lot before, but like we didn't have to triple it. So it was a lot, it was a lot getting done things. And like when you have busy mentors, it can be very difficult to get them on the same timeline as you, especially in terms of communication. So things like that were a little difficult. Yeah, that's what I would say. Um,
Yeah, so my what I'm most proud of is actually back from one of the last experiments that I did for my PhD. I was working with xenopus or frog egg extracts, and I was studying how this mitotic spindle that separates our DNA during mitosis is formed. And I was doing some live imaging, and no one in my lab had done it before. And I had spent a lot of time and tears trying to get this assay to work. And so we did, and it ended up in a really nice paper. And there was one reviewer comment, they were like, these are the most beautiful movies that I've ever seen, or something like that. And I've saved that reviewer comment like in my email, and I just like go to it on a rainy day. But it's something that is like, yeah, I worked really hard to get those assays working, and it's something that I'm really proud of because it was all me pretty much. Well, with help from my mentor, but like I was doing all the hands-on experience, like, so.
No, I love that. Are the images in the paper? You should share the
Yeah.
paper.
Yeah. So
Yeah, that's something I definitely like to see. Very inspiring. So now down to the nitty-gritty. What is something that you really do not like about your current position? So your least favorite and the most challenging parts of your current position.
I can go first. I do not like all the admin stuff. Like I spend so much time on emails. It's ridiculous. I hate it. I try to just like concentrate, dedicated times during the day, like first thing when I get in, noon, and then the first thing when I leave, because it could suck up your whole day. Like, and in reality, it's not that important, but I do feel like some sort of obligation because I have more responsibilities as a faculty member. So that is just, it drives me nuts. Like it was overnight, like from postdoc to PI, you go from maybe 5 emails a day to 100 emails a day. And most of them is junk. So I'm just like deleting, but sometimes you do have to put out fires. And then the second was like the most challenging. Yeah. So personnel, dealing with people, that you don't get trained for that at all during your grad training or your postdoc training. And so like I took a class this summer, or a workshop that gave me 30 hours of training on how to manage people and manage a lab. I have like 3 books that I've read, and it's not, people are people. You can't predict what they're going to do. And so just learning that, my mom is always like, everyone's not going to be like you, Lesley. Like you have to remember that. And so that's been the hardest, and just learning how to figure out, one, I can't be a mentor to everyone, and that's okay. And being okay with that, and figuring out what personalities work best with my mentoring style, and being able to convey that to someone without saying, without making them feel like there's something wrong with them, because there's nothing wrong with a person. It's just that we may not mesh well, and I won't be able to help them reach their goals that they want to have.
I completely agree, actually. I think the most difficult part is working with people. Especially as an introvert, because you're not getting what I'm saying. And sometimes working remotely or like working from home, people, you're like responding to a lot of emails, or you're in a lot of meetings, and it's like some of these meetings could have been emails, and some of these emails needed to be a meeting. So I think that's definitely the most difficult part, is like communicating your science effectively in the emails or in the meetings, and then working with people who aren't satisfied with the way the project may be going, and they're like hoping that it goes a certain way, and you're like, no, it's not going that way, and we can't change the data to make it go that way. So definitely working with people.
Yeah, it's very insightful. Thank you both so much. I think I have one quick question. So how did you, as a mentors, how do you both kind of navigate your clashing with a mentee, maybe personality wise, or just trying to figure out how to work with them? How would you go about it of approaching it, Dr. Weaver, Dr. Smith?
Well, first you have a friend who you can say what you want to say to the person without saying it
Yeah.
to the person that you're clashing with, to just like get it all out and be like, this is what I want to say. You definitely like sometimes when I see things on Twitter that people post, it's like, yeah, you don't have a friend that you can say this.
Yes.
Like you need to find a friend real quick. But sometimes, like usually for me, I have to take a step back because like if you believe in astrological signs, I'm a Scorpio, so I am a Spitfire. Like I can pop off at the mouth real quick, which is not great for professional settings. And so I usually just have to take a moment. I have to get my emotions under control, and then I try and think about that person's perspective. So I do a lot of like retrospect, like thinking about like a previous conversation and things like that, and try to see from their standpoint where they may be coming from and where there could be miscommunication between the two of us, where it's like, did I not communicate properly what I was expecting? And so now that I started my lab, the new thing is, or a lot of new PIs, they have these lab manuals where you write out, and it's in clear form, what your expectations are, like what your students can or trainees can expect from you, from me as a mentor, and what I expect from them. And then I also have the insight that the goal can be the same. Like the goal is the PhD, but everyone may not get there the same way. So trying to figure out like what motivates them, like do they like checking things off, do they like seeing the big picture, figuring out what motivates them to use that to get them to do what's needed to finish their degree. So I think like, with age, like I'm not 25 anymore where I, just react like I used to. So that wisdom with age, and then just being aware, like I think being aware that everyone's different and there is a lot of miscommunication, which is weird because we're in this world where we have all of this technology, but I feel like we're really bad at communicating with each other.
So I don't necessarily have like PhD mentees, but I have had peer mentors and et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of my mentees aren't formal like Dr. Weaver's are. So it's not necessarily like me guiding them through a PhD. I feel like it's more of a personal mentorship where I'm helping or guiding them to the right decision, or like helping them figure out, oh, should I do a master's? Should I do a PhD? Like, how do I navigate this setting versus like, oh, I need to get this person through their PhD right now. So it's very different when you have that personal relationship. So a lot of the times you can be a lot more frank, or you can be a lot more blunt with the person, depending on like your relationship, of course. But I prefer more intimate mentee and mentor relationships. So I'm kind of upfront about that. Like, this is kind of how I would like us to interact. And if you're cool with that, like you're cool with that. If not, then we can, compromise and figure out what works best for them. But also something to consider is I like to leave a lot of it to the mentee to decide what kind of relationship they want, because I feel like they're the one who knows best what they need. And so I try to leave it on them to be like, I want us to meet like X, Y, and Z, or I want to discuss this. And I feel like that's a better relationship just because I'm not like pushing all my thoughts on them. So if we were to clash, it would be like, okay, why are we clashing right now, girl? And we can figure it out.
Yeah, I think in the academic side, well, and actually any setting, like documentation is always good to have. Like if you are in conflict with someone, like for the people in my lab, every time we meet, they have to write up like a little summary or put it in a PowerPoint, like here were my goals the last time we met, here's the data, and then at the end it's like, what are my goals and expected completions? And it's like, unless the flies died or an antibody didn't come in, if you didn't complete those goals, you have to explain to me why, because I don't set goals for anyone. Like, they set them themselves and we agree upon them. So any type of documentation, like if you're in like a more industry position and you have a meeting with your supervisor, if it's verbal, send a follow-up email and BCC yourself or CC yourself to say, hey, we just had this meeting, I wanted to clarify X, Y, and Z, so that you have that documentation in case there's any type of problem in the future.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you both so much.
And I actually have a quick question for Dr. Weaver, for as other undergrad students, and you mentioned how a lot of lab PIs have handbooks. Would you say it's like appropriate to ask for to view the handbook for PIs that you're interested in working with? Or is that something you should wait till like after you get accepted?
No, I think you should know like upfront what you're going to be working with. Like, if that's a red flag, like if you should ask to talk to previous undergrads, any grads that are currently in the lab, like any type of interaction that you can get a sense of what you're walking into. And if a PI says no, then you should just run, like mine isn't public, but if someone asks me for it, and I usually do send it, especially to undergrads, when I get an email from an undergrad, I make it very clear, like, these are my expectations of undergrads, which is to work 10 hours a week in the lab, that there's a probation period of a semester, and we'll see how it goes, and so forth and so on like that. But then you also get the lab manual so that and have those clear expectations that I have for undergrads as well as everyone else in the lab.
And my next question is, what type of skills should people develop who want to join your career?
I think that some of the skills would be critical thinking, of course. And I think that creativity is important. Being able to think outside the box and to bring a new idea is important. And then attention to detail, because when you're working with a lot of data sets or working on like a bioinformatics pipeline, you need to make sure that you're working with the data properly, and also cognizant of like the ethical ramifications of if you are not handling the data properly and like something gets leaked or something like that. So attention to detail is definitely very important, because you don't want to miss out on like subtle differences or something big potentially.
I'd say for me, it's all the things that Dr. Smith said as well. Attention to detail. I would be learn to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. So if you're not uncomfortable, then you're not really learning. Not that you're all the way uncomfortable, but there should be some discomfort in what you're experiencing. I think I don't want to say grit, but there has to be like some sort of like
Determination
where it's like, this assay that you're doing just will not work, the control won't even work, and it's like, I'm going to keep like tweaking little bits at a time to get this to work, to reach the goal. Like, that's a lot of what grad school is, or even research, like a lot of just staying with the eye on the prize. And so I think that, but I also want to say, I think a lot of people talk about work-life balance a lot. And at this workshop that I went to, they said there is no such thing as work-life balance. It's just life balance, because work is a part of life. But I think it's really important that these are just titles, right? We're all just in this job. It's a job. And to do something that you enjoy without losing yourself in it, I think is really important. So I know this is like supposed to be like, how do you get to this career and stuff like that? If at any point in time you're unhappy and you're like, why am I doing this? Then it's really a time to reflect. And it doesn't mean that you're a failure in any sort of way, but we only have this one life to live, and you should do what makes you happy. So I know that's a little bit off topic, but I just don't, and I also don't want people to think like I have to have this skill set to have this job, or the job that Dr. Smith has. Like, everyone comes to it in their own sort of path. I would just say, if someone presents you with an opportunity, how I got here was that I was presented with opportunities. I started as a lab assistant washing dishes, and then I was talking to the grad students, and they said, you should ask Claire for an undergrad project. And it's like, oh, I don't know. But I did, and I was afforded that opportunity. And then, I went to grad school, and from there, it's not guaranteed that I would have graduated. It's not guaranteed that I would have had a postdoc, but my postdoc advisor had money. So that was an opportunity for me to go learn something new. And then even my current position, I was talking to a former committee member of my thesis committee who was giving a talk at Johns Hopkins. And I said, oh, I have this grant. I want to do a targeted search to the Midwest. IU was hiring at that time, and she contacted the search committee and was like, we need to interview Lesley. It was an opportunity for me to interview for this position, and it worked out. So there's no like formula to get here that works.
Very serendipitous.
So for people who want to join your career, how would they go about finding employment opportunities?
I think, as she mentioned, it's kind of about who you know. It's your network and connecting with people, or people you think are in the field that you want to be in, or like in positions that you can see yourself in. I think that's the biggest thing, is just networking and meeting other people and figuring out what is out there for me to do.
Yeah, it's the same. I mean, there's always the job boards, and if you want to be in a certain area, you can look at universities in that region of the world or country that you want to be at. But having a network and starting your network early is very beneficial. So you want to find, like, even as an undergrad, you want to find mentors who will be champions for you, that will introduce you to their colleagues or their friends who may remember you at some point in time and say, oh, hey, I remember this undergrad, they were in so-and-so's lab, we should give them this opportunity. Like, you never know who's going to be on the admissions committee for grad school, who's going to be reading your grants. So yeah.
Yeah, that is advice I'm starting to realize is true. As I get further on my undergrad and have all my friends graduate, it's very important to network and who you know. Do you have any tips for maintaining a healthy work-life balance, or even just life balance?
I've been pretty bad at it the last couple months, but now that I'm back on track, I think the biggest thing is, right now I'm rediscovering hobbies. I feel like in the pandemic, like pre-pandemic, I would work out like twice a day. Like, it was crazy. And then during the pandemic, it was like, okay, I can't do all the things I love. What am I supposed to do? And so people would ask me, like, what are your hobbies? And it's like, well, my hobbies, I can't do them where I want to do them. And I'm like a very particular person. So like people are like, oh, well, go outside for a run. I don't like running. Why would I go do that? So now I'm rediscovering like the things that I love, and trying to figure out, like, now I have a firm stop. Like, I stopped working at 4:30 to 5. I never worked on the weekends to begin with, so that hasn't changed. But I try to go to sleep on time, relatively, and I just do things I enjoy. So
Yeah, I think what Dr. Smith said, like having those boundaries and not letting anything impinge on those boundaries. Of course, like during deadlines, those are like the crunch times where you do kind of work nonstop to get something done. But for me, I don't answer emails after 8 o'clock. If you send it, it can wait till I get in to my office the next day. I don't answer emails on the weekends unless like I really feel like I want to. Sometimes like Sunday, I'll send a bunch, it'll be like rapid fire emails because I just want to start my Monday in a sane space, so to speak.
yeah.
Yeah, I have a dog, so that takes a lot of time. Like she's my boss when I get home.
What kind of dog do you have?
I have a miniature dachshund, so
Oh,
yeah,
I'm
her
trying to
name's
get a dog.
Zoe. Yeah, a little dog, but she makes up for it with attitude. So, and then it's just kind of like finding things that you like to do. I like to read. I read a lot of fantasy. So
Oh, I
that's
love reading.
yeah, it's a way to escape. Or like I love trash TV, like Married at First Sight. That is
Oh my gosh, I
my
was watching that last night. Did you watch it last?
not last night. I haven't watched this week's episode yet, but it's finding those things to just disengage that I think is important. Like having friends, when you become a professor, you're kind of transplanted in a space. I was lucky to go back to where I did my grad work. So I do have a couple friends here, and I have close friends that are 2 hours away. So, like and not this coming weekend, but next weekend, I'm going to a women's Christian camp, and it's like no cell phones, no way anyone can, well, they can contact us. There's an emergency line, but it's a way to disengage. And I think that's the biggest thing. So when I'm at work, I work. Like I put my phone, like now Apple has like those do not disturb things. There's no need for us to be like on our phones all the time. And so I think that's where my age is showing itself because I grew up with the internet. I'm like an old millennial. So this like needing to be on Twitter and Snapchat, whatever the kids are doing these days, I don't have that desire. Yeah, so it's like I am like doing deep work. That's another book that people can read. It's called Deep Work, and it's saying like stay focused on a task and get it done. You can take little breaks, like have a lunch break. I go take a walk during the day to go get coffee, but that way when I say I'm going home, I can say I have no guilt at all. I did my work. I got done what I needed to get done. And then when I'm at home, I can be at home. The other thing that really shows my age is like I live with a planner, like a paper planner. This is for next week, but like this was my past week. Like, I have it like everything written out and I have to check it off. And so it's like if I plan my week, things that I need to get done, then I can stay balanced. So yeah, I'm 36. So it's not old, but it's definitely older than probably the people watching this.
No worries. I'm the same way, but electronic. So it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm trying to get into planning and specifically like electronic and digital planning, and I really like the pretty ones and personalizing it. I feel like it's a good relaxer.
I just started using Notion, and Notion is great because I'm very analytical and I really like planning. And I do everything on Notion. I even do my budget on there, and I love Excel. So just a recommendation if you need a note-taking app or like planning app.
Yeah, Excel
I
is
might
great.
actually.
It's great. Oh my goodness. I use it all the time for everything.
It's
Yeah.
so good.
Oh, I use like Samsung Notes and just like write physically, but I might do that. I just get like PDFs and then print them. Um, do you have any advice for current trainees, so undergrads, graduate students, and postdocs who want to pursue your career path?
I
Um,
would just
yeah.
say, like, if this is what you want to do, like, don't let anyone like dissuade you, like make you unfocused. So, this is Black in genetics, right? There's not many Black in genetics people. Like, I am the only Black American faculty member in my department. There's 72 faculty, including like the research and teaching faculty. And then we have a Black Canadian. So, and I'm the only Black woman. So it's not, it's not like I'm going to have that sort of camaraderie, but I do have camaraderie with my other colleagues, like who are women who may be marginalized in other ways. And so I think finding some sort of community in a space where no one else looks like you is very healthy. But, there's going to be haters. Let them hate, and just you stay on your focus.
Yeah, I completely agree. I would say, if this is something you want to do, pursue it. I have a friend who's in grad school and she hates it. And I told her to quit a long time ago. I was like, there's nothing wrong with quitting. There's nothing wrong with resigning or deciding that this isn't the career path you want. I'm all for going after what you want to do, not because you feel like, oh, well, I'm embarrassed because now I decided I don't want to do this. Okay, you don't want to do it anymore, so don't do it. And to her point about being the only Black person, I'm the only Black person on my team in data science, and Novartis is a like top 10, top 2 pharmaceutical industry. And when I was in onboarding, I was the only Black person consistently. So I always am a big proponent of finding your people and finding the people that you can relate to or create some kind of camaraderie, and sticking with them and finding good friendships with them, hopefully, or at least work relationships.
Yeah, and even having your friend who may not be at your institution. Like, I have a friend who's a Black woman faculty member, and sometimes like we call each other and we're like, girl, let me tell you what happened at faculty meeting today.
Literally.
It's like to let it out, just to say like, okay, am I like the one on a different planet, or was everyone else? Okay, great, I was on the right planet. And then just taking care of your mental health. Like, I think in the Black community, like mental health is stigmatized, or having like depression is stigmatized. Like, we're not supposed to be happy all the time. Like, it's okay to have bad days, to be sad, but finding ways to decompress and cope, that's really helpful. And especially as an assistant professor, I have no experience on industry side, so I can imagine it's the same.
Yeah, I would say it's very much the same. I yeah, I haven't ran into any issues, but if I was to, I would know who to talk to. So, but everyone's been a big proponent thus far. I shall keep you updated on that though.
And you guys kind of touched on the next question, which is what's it like being a person of color, a Black woman in a predominantly white field? Could you guys touch more on like how you deal with, if you've experienced them, like microaggressions and like subtle racism and stuff? And then what's it like walking into a room like you're the only person that looks like you and dealing with that, and I guess being okay with that?
I think that for me, I have only been at PWIs, predominantly white institutions. So, like growing up, I grew up like I was in a predominantly Black neighborhoods only. So I didn't really like we had some white people, but it wasn't a lot. And going to college is when I really like started making white friends, but I didn't like struggle with it. And I haven't faced too many microaggressions, honestly. The only one, and this is like across the board, is that people cannot say Markia, or they don't pronounce it, or they email it wrong, and like everyone does that. It's not just like white people, which is frustrating. But I consider that to be a microaggression because it's like some of these names is more difficult than mine. And I have a very like 6 letters. It's very simple and it's in the email. But I haven't really experienced any, but being a computational biologist and being like pretty much all of the seminars or all of the conferences, I've been like one of the only Black women, and there's not a lot of women to begin with, has been very interesting. Luckily, my PhD mentors were both women, and so they were very big champions for me. And like, if somebody said my name wrong in a meeting, they would correct them, or they would address like if someone was saying something incorrectly. Like, I have an epidemiology background as well, and so a lot of people like who are older will say blacks instead of saying Black people. And so, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. And so they will correct and be like, it's Black people, or like, you should say, Hispanic people, or et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's very important to have people who are cognizant and who are aware of terminology and what they should be saying and shouldn't be saying, because that is really helpful. And being in a space, I've been lucky, I was in a space where I could communicate different things, or like my mentors are big on mental health, so they did check-ins a lot, or when like different occurrences happened in the news, they were big on like addressing it with the lab or addressing it in some form or manner. And I think that's really important for creating a safe space.
Yeah. I think for me, it's been a mix of both. So, like Dr. Smith, I grew up primarily in white spaces. So even in my hometown, even though my family's been there forever, I was in class with mostly white people. And so that it wasn't anything new to me, but I think as I got older and I started advocating for myself more, that's when people would say things like, oh, you're so demanding. And it's like, am I really demanding to ask you to do your job? Okay. Or I've had people ask me if I was worried that I would come across as the angry Black woman in the department. And I said, well, I'm Black, I'm a woman, and sometimes I get angry. So I don't know what you want me to do with that. So those are like little microaggressions where I was telling someone that I couldn't explain why I missed Baltimore. Like, I grew up in Indiana, went to school at Arizona State, which is the PWI, and then I went to Baltimore, and I think that was the biggest culture shock for me, to be in the dominant race in a place. And so when I moved back to Indiana, I didn't think I would have as much as hard of a time adjusting as I have. And I went back to Baltimore in August for my friend's wedding, and I was at a TGI Fridays with someone, and they were just playing like R&B and rap, and I was like, this is what I miss, because this would not happen in TGI Fridays in Bloomington. And so I think for me, like, just navigating these spaces, I find my allies. It's not my job to teach people like
Exactly.
about my experience, but I do find people who are interested and want to embrace my culture. So some of my colleagues are going with me to this event that IU hosts every year. It's called Potpourri of the Arts, and it's just showcasing the African diaspora in arts with song and dance. And so 4 of my colleagues who are not Black are going with me, and 2 of them went with me last year, and then we added 2 more this year. So it's like finding people who want to make change, who are interested in understanding my experience, and we go from there. I've been very lucky that because I'm back at my same institution, my grad advisor, who is a white woman, like, coming in, she was like, I told the department that it's not your job to fix the problems that are here. So having someone who else is advocating for me is great. And then I also have like a male colleague who is very aware of like how women are treated. So we were in faculty meeting yesterday, and it was kind of like an open discussion. And I just raised my hand, and he started talking. He was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, Lesley, you go ahead." And it's just that's helpful when there are other things that go on in the background.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, especially for STEM, and especially I know some people who went to historically Black colleges, and then the culture shock of changing. I can say, like, from my experience in high school, I went through a culture shock with a very white school, and it's helpful to hear that it's something that's like adjustable, and there's allies and things you can do. But thank you guys all for coming and interviewing and telling us about your career. It was all very inspirational. And yeah.
Thank
It was
you.
great meeting you all.
It
It
was
was
nice
a lot.
meeting you too. I might hit you up so I can hear what you think about Married at First Sight.
Okay, yes.